From 2019 to 2022, NAR collected, wait for it, $1,294,998,071 from its members. When plunder has become a way of life for a group of men living together in society, they create for themselves, in the course of time, a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. Frederick Bastiat. In this video, I demonstrate how decision makers at the National Association of Realtors manipulated elected officials to enact laws that are against public interest, thereby created a legal system that authorizes their plunder, created a moral code or a code of ethics that justifies their plunder, and coerce realtors and the public at large to glorify and adhere to that code. I also demonstrate that NAR's interests, policies, and legislative efforts are contrary to the real estate industry and the public best interests. Ultimately, NAR may cause the real estate industry to lose the public's trust. I'm Getchin Sherry, founder of Homestead Realty and Homestead School of Real Estate. By training, I'm a lawyer. I'm also a Florida licensed real estate broker, a Florida licensed real estate instructor, and a licensed loan officer. As it relates to the Florida real estate industry, I also highlighted the inherent flaws in NAR's MLS policy changes and the necessary amendment Florida lawmakers must make to Chapter 475 of the Florida statute. While I do not agree with the decision in the Burnett Commission lawsuit, I understand it. However, I waited to see if NAR would have taken any meaningful steps to get the industry out of the situation its guidance and policies have gotten us into. Unfortunately, NAR's policy changes fell short and do not adequately address the inherent policy problem. Rather, NAR MLS policy changes are designed to give the illusion that NAR's decision makers have taken measures to fix the current legal issues facing the real estate industry. If you want to see meaningful and positive changes in the real estate industry, I suggest that you share this video with your state elected officials and other real estate professionals. Ask your state lawmakers to take immediate actions to reverse NAR's decades-long predatory behavior. Why should you be concerned about NAR and its policies? Well, folks, NAR's policies can adversely impact the U.S. economy if our lawmakers do not act. In 2023, for example, the United States GDP was $27.36 trillion. The real estate industry alone contributed $4.65 trillion. That is 17% of the U.S. GDP. That amount did not take into account the other ancillary industries that relied on the real estate industry, such as construction, finance, and insurance. Those industries are heavily reliant on real estate. Is NAR the real estate industry's authority? Contrary to widely held belief, NAR is not the real estate industry's authority. Your state legislature is the authority because it enacts laws that govern all real estate related matters within your state. Therefore, your state legislature must act. For example, in Florida, Chapter 455 of the Florida statute grants authority to the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, that is DBPR. The DBPR is under the executive branch of the governor. The Florida governor appoints the DBPR secretary and members of the Florida Real Estate Commission, also referred to as FREC. And the state senate confirms those members that were appointed by the governor. Under Florida law, FREC is the regulatory body charged with protecting the public's interests by regulating real estate brokers, brokerage firms, broker associates, sales associate, real estate schools, and instructors. So, if NAR is not the real estate industry's authority, what is NAR and how did NAR manage to convince the world that it is the real estate industry's authority? Well, I'll give you a quick hint. It's all about the money and effective propaganda. What is NAR? What is NAR? On its website, NAR claims to be widely considered one of the most effective advocacy organization in the country. NAR claims its building is located steps away from the United States Capitol. It claims it advocates for federal policy initiatives that strengthens the ability of Americans to own, buy, sell real estate. Its code of ethics ensures that consumers are served by requiring realtors to cooperate with each other and furthering clients' best interests. In reality, NAR is a self proclaimed regulatory agency and lobbying organization that provides its members with its accreditation and designation. NAR is a not for profit private organization designated as a 501c6. The National Association of Realtors is organized under the laws of Illinois with its principal place of business in Chicago. NAR has enjoyed tax exempt status since 1934. History of NAR. NAR was founded in 1908 as the National Association of Real Estate Exchanges in Chicago. In 1916, it rebranded itself as the National Association of Real Estate Boards. Between 1949 and 1950, it registered the term realtor with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, making the word realtor its registered trademark. However, in 1972, it adopted its current name, which is National Association of Realtors, also commonly referred to as NAR. Bob Goldberg served as NAR's CEO from August 2017 until November 2023. After 30 years at NAR, Bob Goldberg announced his retirement at NAR, following some controversies, which I do not wish to get into in this video. As of November 20th, 2023, Ms. Nakia Wright replaced Bob Goldberg and began serving as the interim CEO at the National Association of Realtors. Despite ongoing legal issues that threatens most real estate professionals' livelihood, in 2024, NAR wants realtors to give more of their hard-earned money to NAR. According to NAR's approved budget, NAR policymakers they're expecting to collect $277,380,000 from 1.3 million realtors. How much money NAR collected from its members between 2019 and 2022? From 2019 to 2022, NAR collected, wait for it, $1,294,998,071 from its members. According to its 2022 tax filing, NAR, a non-profit private organization, reported revenue was $328,361,670. Yes, you heard me right. 328 million. How about 2021? In 2021, NAR revenue was $327,342,361. How about 2020? In 2020, NAR reported revenue was $301,056,283. In 2019, NAR's revenue was $338,237,757. Thank you for watching. If you find this video informative, kindly subscribe, like, and share. Again, NAR collected $1,294,998,071 from its members in 4 years. Where does the money go? Let's take a look. Where does the money go? I'm sure you would like to know that. So I did some research. According to its 2022 tax filing, NAR, a nonprofit, privately held organization, provided first class or chartered travel to its key employees and officers. From 2019 to 2022, NAR also spent $242,302,929 in its marketing efforts. Why? In 2020, while most realtors were unable to support their family, NAR decision makers gave themselves a pay raise. Bob Goldberg, the former CEO, was the most highly paid policymaker at NAR. As you can see, Bob Goldberg, total compensation from 2019 to 2022 was $10,031,982. And you can see from 2019, the income increased by $250,000. So you remember in 2020, Americans were struggling. Most real estate agents could not earn any money. But yet, NAR's decision makers decided to give themselves the largest pay increase, $250,000 for the CEO. By comparison, the President of the United States earns $400,000 per year plus $50,000 expense, for a total of $450,000 annually. In 2022, NAR, a nonprofit organization, paid its CEO $2,645,695, while the President of the United States serves a 4-year term and earns $1,800,000 total. $1.8 million, that's all the president gets for a 4-year term. Well, between the years of 2019 and 2022, NAR paid Bob Goldberg $10,031,982. These are the top 9 earners at NAR for fiscal year 2022. While the president serves a 4-year term, his or her total income would have amounted to $1.8 million total. That is $1,800,000 total. While during that same period, Bob Goldberg was paid $10,031,982. Folks, in my opinion, that is the essence of plunder. Now, you may ask, what does NAR provide in terms of services or product? No, NAR knows how to spend realtors' money. That's what they do best. In 2022, NAR spent $55,297,946 in its marketing efforts. In 2021, NAR spent $61,267,173 in its marketing efforts. In 2020, NAR spent $24,906,555 in its propaganda machine. Remember, NAR in 2020, there was barely any real estate activity. In 2019, however, NAR spent $100,831,253 in its propaganda machinery. Was the Burnett Commission lawsuit avoidable? For decades, the U.S. Department of Justice, also referred to as DOJ, warned NAR that its rules, policies, and practices unreasonably restrained trade and were in violation of Section 1 of the Sherman Act. Despite losing the Sitzer-Burnett Commission lawsuit, NAR refuses to take the necessary measures to resolve the inherent flaws in its rules, policies, and practices. Instead, NAR published its 9 MLS policy changes that will become effective on August 17, 2024. Number 1, eliminate and prohibit any requirement of offers of compensation in the MLS between listing brokers or sellers to buyer brokers or other representatives. Policymakers are fully aware this measure is insufficient and will not resolve the problem because there have been many rumors in the industry about potential loopholes and MLS workarounds. Number 2, retain and define cooperation for MLS participation. NAR's concept of cooperation is the obligation to share information on listed property and to make property available to other brokers for showing to prospective purchasers and tenants when it is in the best interest of their clients. In my opinion, NAR's cooperative policy is inherently flawed because it interferes with agency law doctrine and it tips the negotiating scale in sellers' favor. I will provide a more detailed analysis later. For economy of time, I will not discuss NAR policy changes number 3 through 7 because they are repetitive and serve a similar purpose as they aim to prevent potential loopholes and workarounds on the MLS. Number 3, eliminate and prohibit offers of compensation to buyer's broker. Number 4, eliminate all broker compensation fields. Number 5, require the MLS not to create, facilitate, or support any non-MLS mechanism to make offers of compensation to buyer's broker or other buyer's representative. Number 6, prohibit the use of MLS data to offer compensation to buyer's representative. Number 7, MLS must not enable the ability to communicate compensation offers to cooperating brokers. Number 8, require compensation disclosures to sellers and prospective sellers and buyers. Well, sellers and buyers are fully aware that real estate professionals receive compensation. So this too will not reconcile the inherent flaws in NAR's cooperative policy. Number 9, require MLS participant working with buyer to enter into a written agreement with the buyer prior to touring a home. Unfortunately, this agreement will not solve the problem. Buyer brokerage agreements have been available for decades. The problem has been most buyer's agents struggle to get the buyers to sign an agreement, primarily due to NAR's cooperative policy. In my opinion, NAR's policy changes are not intended to solve the problem that exists in the real estate industry, particularly in Florida. Rather, NAR's policy changes are designed to give the illusion that the decision makers have taken measures to fix the current legal issues. Remember, NAR's policy, their policies, put the industry where it's at now. However, the very key policy that must be changed is the very one NAR does not want to change, as evidence in its decision to retain and define cooperation for MLS participation. If NAR wants to change its cooperative compensation scheme, it knows too well how to accomplish that. After all, according to NAR, it is the most effective lobbying organization in the country. The reality is, every member of the Florida State Legislature, every NAR decision or policy maker, every competent real estate agent know what must be done. They either lack the willpower to act or the current cooperative scheme benefits them. Why NAR's MLS policy changes are inadequate. For decades, NAR has advocated for legislation that support its cooperative policy and require its members to adhere to a policy that has proven detrimental to the real estate industry. According to NAR, the current compensation method, which is the cooperative policy, benefits buyers and sellers alike. In my opinion, the current compensation method, cooperative policy method, benefits large real estate firms. Large real estate brokerage firms with thousands of associates have sufficient resources to maintain internal listing systems, also referred to as pocket listings. I'm sure you've heard of it, that enables them to complete residential and commercial real estate transactions without cooperating with any other brokerage. Thereby, large real estate brokerage firm gets to keep the full commission fees. This is one of the reasons NAR and large real estate brokerage firms want to keep the cooperative compensation scheme, because it benefits them. It definitely doesn't benefit the buyer and the seller. A policy that forces buyer's agent to cooperate with the seller's agent limits the buyer's agent's ability to negotiate the best price for the buyer. That is akin to a policy that requires a married couple to hire the same divorce attorney with the presumption that the divorce attorney will adhere to a particular code of ethics. There's a conflict of interest. In my opinion, NAR's cooperative policy does not benefit buyers nor sellers. A quick analysis will demonstrate NAR's cooperative policy is contrary to agency law doctrine because, think about it, sellers want to sell high, buyers want to buy low. Considering the fact in its nature, the real estate business is adversarial. NAR's cooperative policy contradict agency law doctrine. Under NAR's cooperative policy, buyers do not receive adequate representation in their residential real estate transactions. The cooperative policy undermines the buyer's agent's professional value. The cooperative policy encourages buyers to engage listing agents, sellers agents directly, hoping their offer would be accepted. Under NAR's cooperative policy, buyers pay higher prices for their home and without adequate representation. Consequently, home prices increase artificially, which hurt the very people whose behalf NAR claims it advocates. To better illustrate how the cooperative policy contradicts agency law, let us look at Florida authorized brokerage relationship, or real estate agency law. The law states, the part that's highlighted in yellow, we're going to discuss that first. A real estate licensee, that is a real estate agent, may not operate as dual agent. Again, a real estate licensee may not operate as a disclosed or non-disclosed dual agent. A real estate agent may not operate as a dual agent. The law gives you the definition of dual agent. Dual agency means a broker who represents as a fiduciary both the prospective buyer and prospective seller in a real estate transaction. Looking at the blue, there's a loophole. There's an exception. A licensee, a real estate licensee, may enter into a brokerage relationship as either a transaction broker or as a single agent with potential buyers and sellers. So what is this law really saying? It's saying in a transaction brokerage relationship, a real estate agent can represent both the buyer and the seller. Florida brokerage relationship law, FS 475, is clearly contradictory. As stated, FS 475 prohibits real estate licensees from operating as dual agent. In other words, the law does not allow real estate agents to represent both buyer and seller in a real estate transaction as a fiduciary. Yet, Florida lawmakers managed to carve out an exception, a loophole, if you would, in the law that allows the very behavior the law prohibits. Folks, that is legal hocus pocus. That is lawmakers performing legal tricks. How did Florida lawmakers manage to perform this legal trick? Well, with NAR's magic wand, Florida lawmakers redefined the meaning of representation. For example, in a single agent brokerage relationship, a buyer or seller, not both, receives full representation from a real estate agent. Whereas in a transaction broker relationship, a buyer and a seller receive limited representation from a real estate agent. The limited representation concept is responsible for most residential real estate transaction-related problems in Florida. Can you imagine your divorce lawyer advising you that he or she is providing limited representation for both you and your soon to be ex spouse. How about in a criminal case where the prosecutor provides limited representation to the state and the accused person? Well, folks, according to NAR, in the Florida legislature, limited representation is good enough for residential home buyers. Be mindful that buying a home is likely to be the most expensive purchase most home buyers will make. Florida lawmakers recognized the inherent risks that are associated with dual agency. They nonetheless created a loophole in the law that exposes Florida homebuyers to those very risks. Under the transaction broker concept, Florida lawmakers created a pathway to allow Florida real estate licensees to represent both buyers and sellers in a real estate transaction, which is what the law initially prevented. According to NAR, the current compensation method benefits buyers and sellers alike. NAR's rationale is the current way brokerage services are paid prevents a greater cost burden that would be especially devastating for first-time and low-income home buyers. Contrary to NAR's claim, in a Florida residential real estate purchase transaction, the buyer pays for all fees. The buyer pays both agents commission because the commission fees are already included in the sales price. In a Florida real estate transaction, for example, the buyer also pays for mortgage loan cost, mortgage insurance costs, homeowner insurance premium, flood insurance premium if applicable, title insurance and title services costs, state sales and intangible taxes, home appraisal, home inspection, and survey costs. Undoubtedly, NAR's decision makers know these very basic facts. Yet, NAR policymakers seek to convince the world that homebuyers cannot afford to pay for their representation. The reality is, every state legislature member, every NAR policymaker, every competent realtor, every competent real estate agent knows NAR cooperative policy is not in the buyer's nor the seller's best interests. However, everyone pretends that NAR's cooperative policy is effective because it is convenient. How can state lawmakers fix the problem NAR created? How can state lawmakers fix the problem NAR created? Well, for decades, NAR chose to ignore the obvious problem it created and promoted policies that are detrimental to the very people NAR purports to advocate on behalf. If NAR is to be taken seriously, NAR must take meaningful steps to get the real estate industry out of the situation its guidance and policies have gotten it into. NAR should start by doing what NAR does best: lobby the Florida legislature, lobby Florida lawmakers to amend FS 475 and abolish, that is, to eliminate the transaction brokerage exception. Lobby other state legislative bodies with similar loopholes to remove all legal loopholes that contradicts agency law doctrine. Regarding the Florida real estate industry, NAR policy changes will only worsen the conditions and drive prices higher. To help correct Florida's home affordability crisis, Florida lawmakers must make the necessary amendment to Chapter 475 of the Florida statute and eliminate the transaction brokerage relationship that allows real estate brokerage to represent both buyer and seller. By abolishing the transaction brokerage exception, realtors would be required to adhere to the law, not some abstract code of ethics that are rarely, if ever, enforced. Eliminating the transaction broker exception would ensure home buyers have true representation in their residential real estate transactions. By abolishing the transaction brokerage exception, lawmakers would have eliminated the current conflict of interest that exists in all residential real estate transaction that involves a brokerage. By abolishing the transaction broker exception, home prices would stabilize. By abolishing the transaction broker exception, home buyers, the people NAR claims to advocate on behalf, would be able to buy their home at an affordable price. While I do not agree with the decision in the Burnett Commission lawsuit, I do not agree with it because I do not believe the sellers were the legitimate plaintiff. I still don't believe the sellers had any gripe because, in fact, they all benefited. They probably sold their home for much higher prices than they otherwise would have. While I do not agree with the decision in the Burnett Commission lawsuit, I understand it. However, NAR should recognize that buyers and realtors are legitimate parties who may seek redress from NAR for its 116-year deception because buyers were the parties who paid all real estate commission and continue to do so. Realtors paid for NAR's assets, but realtors do not own any such assets. Lastly, I suggest that Florida lawmakers take immediate action to amend Chapter 475 of the Florida statute to eliminate the transaction broker loophole that legitimizes NAR's broker cooperation policy. Thank you for watching, and if you find this video informative, kindly subscribe, share, and like. And please ask your lawmakers to change the Florida law.